within Islam, the very word itself means peace, right? And so I think Hizmet is really an instrument of peace, as an instrument of going into our broken world, trying to make relationships happen, and in that sense, bringing about peace. Things that we say. You might say, in some respect. My name is Father Anthony Ciorra. And I'm delighted to be a part of this interview here today. And briefly, by way of my background, I'm currently at Sacred Hearth University, which is located in Fairfield, Connecticut. And my work there is I teach theology, and I'm also one of the associate vice presidents for mission and identity at the university. Well, my views about the Hizmet movement is that it's one of those movements, if you will, that I think is contributing very positively in this sense, bringing people together. And that's how I've experienced it over these past 25 years, bringing people together. And when I say bringing people together, we say here in the United States, when we talk about real estate, we say it's location, location, location. Here, in terms of Hizmet, we say it's relationships, relationships, relationships. So Hizmet, I think, takes that principle of bringing people together, trying to join people in a very, very broken world, especially when you start to talk about political and religious differences among nations and cultures, that Hizmet, I think, has done really commendable work because they take that principle of bringing people together and they make it concrete through the various programs and the way Hizmet invests its time and its resources for that very important purpose. And I would say this, that the other reason why I think Hizmet is so important, ultimately it's about peace. And it's about world peace. And we know, of course, within Islam, the very word itself means peace, right? And so I think Hizmet is really an instrument of peace, as an instrument of going into our broken world, trying to make relationships happen, and in that sense, bringing about peace. It was one of our theologians who once said that the gods are at war with one another right now. And what he meant by it was that if you take the Christian God, the Muslim God, and the Jewish God, we talk about the division among religions, right? And what he said was that what is critically important is the dialogue among religions. And he felt that the future of world peace depends upon the dialogue among religions. And in fact, that's exactly what Hizmet promotes. All right, Mr. Fethullah Gulen is certainly an extraordinary individual. It was last year that one of our periodicals that's well known throughout the country, called Time Magazine, identified him as one of the most 100 influential people within the entire world. It was our former president, Bill Clinton, who on one occasion publicly thanked Hizmet and thanked Fethullah Gulen for the great work that he's doing. Now, of course, myself, being involved in the academic world, I have a great respect for him as a scholar. He really is an Islamic scholar. He has I think 50 or 60 publications. So here you have a man who thinks things through. He is someone who works with his mind, but having said that, just from what I have read of his many works, he brings it from his mind into his heart. And from that perspective, he's not just an academic. You know this. He was also an imam at one time. He was a preacher. And Fethullah Gulen also has a deep understanding of the Islamic tradition, but also of Sufism. It was Corin Armstrong, who was the great scholar of religions in her many profound works, said that it was or is in the mystical traditions that the religions will come together, in the mystical traditions. And what do we mean by this? The emphasis on the relationship with God. And that, I think, is the most important thing when we talk about Fethullah Gulen. It's clear to me that he is someone who's living in relationship with God. He is someone who brings the spirituality into his academic pursuits. And I think, in addition to that, he's also a very practical man. And when I say practical, what I mean, he's able to take the intellectual truths, he's able to take the spirituality, and he makes it happen in the marketplace. And that's why Time magazine says he's one of the most 100 influential people in the entire world. The vision of Fethullah Gulen, if I had to put it in one word, and I realize, by the way, that it's deeper than this one word, but if I had to put it in one word, I would say it's education. He places a tremendous emphasis upon education. Now, why is this important? It was Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State here in the United States, that said it's all about education. And when she wrote about her experience of the Middle East, what she said was, what's very key is that you bring the traditions together and you invite the various faith traditions, and in particular the Abrahamic tradition, the monotheistic religions, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. We call them people of the book, and that through education, to understand the book, to understand one another through education. Having said that, Fethullah Gulen, in his, and I visited some of the schools, by the way. I visited the schools in Turkey, as well as here in the United States. His emphasis, the schools are not tools of propaganda, but they're places of academic emphasis. And what I have noticed in visiting several of the schools was a couple of things. One, a particular emphasis on the sciences, right? An emphasis on mathematics and also technology. And so therefore, his method of education, even though in fact he is a religious man and represents really what I like to call a moderate Islam, he is educating students for success, but more importantly, to make a difference in society. And this is what he himself says. We educate the students, we serve them so that they can be better citizens. And that, as far as I can tell, is what the ultimate goal is in his schools. The most significant contribution for the world is he is one of the few people, and the Hizmet movement is one of the few movements that I'm aware of that really place an emphasis on interreligious dialogue. Now, this is very important. We all say we believe in dialogue. I mean, it's hard to say, especially in democratic societies, that we don't agree with dialogue. But nevertheless, Fethullah Gulen and his movement put programs in place to make dialogue happen. So, for example, I would mention just a few that I have experienced. One is what we call here in the USA, we have the friendship dinners. And it's always a very inspiring thing when and I've gone to the friendship dinners in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, right? Not just because I like to eat, but I've been to dinners in all of these places. So I've seen this for many, many years. And I see at the dinners, what happens is you bring together a diverse population. You see people of different religions. You see people from different academic institutions. You see politicians, bringing them together. In other words, you're bringing people to the table. And there's something about bringing people to the table, breaking bread with one another, where I have seen barriers come down. Why? You model a way for people to become friends. And in the dinners, friendship dinners, that's precisely what happens. I've seen people develop friendships and relationships that endure over a lifetime. I would mention just very recently, as an example of this, and I can give many, but very recently at Sacred Hearth University, where I am now, we had an evening sponsored by Peace Islands Institute we had a seminar or workshop, and we had a rabbi, we had an Islamic scholar, and we had Christian scholars, all discussing the same topic from 3 different perspectives. And it was just great to see the students come together. It was great to see in the academy people engaging with one another on the level of ideas and also breaking bread together. So I just mentioned that as an example of the many, many events that the Hizmet movement sponsor here in the United States that are furthering the cause of interreligious dialogue. In my view, the Hizmet movement, I think, represents Islam at its very best. Of course, here in the United States, the issue of one's understanding of Islam is a critically important issue since the experience of 9/11 here in the United States. So what happened here in this country is that because of the experience of extremism, because of the experience of terrorism here in this nation, as we experience in other countries around the world as well, that the brand of Islam, if I could call it that Fethullah Gulen speaks of and that the Hizmet movement represents, is really, I would call, a moderate form of Islam. And by moderate, I think a form of Islam that is true to what the Prophet intended. That I experience within the movement here, Muslims coming together as people who want peace, people who are very serious about their spirituality, very serious about their relationship with God, very serious about prayer, very serious about really living a good Muslim life. I see this here in this country, in the movement, at its very best, in a way that's inviting to others. And I would suggest that this is very important to me, because when I see people who might be negative towards Islam because of the experience of Islamic extremism, it's certainly so important that we have those who represent Islam at its very best, as it was meant to be. And I think the movement does precisely that. And for that reason, at least here in the United States, I think that what you are doing is extremely important, because what it's doing here in this country is giving a kind, loving, and compassionate face to Islam.
What the movement helps promote is an understanding of how deeply rooted within proper Islam love is, indeed, because it's rooted in a love for God and therefore love for humanity and love of the planet. And all of the actions and activities of Hizmet help galvanize that kind of an understanding.
In the Hizmet movement and in the schools of the movement, a key thing is that we are educating students to make a difference in society. Also, we're educating students in the Hizmet schools to be good citizens, to be citizens of their country and good citizens of the world.